disadvantaged young people. We do a huge amount of work with people with disabilities. That starts from 4-year-olds all the way up to adults, and engaging in our pan disability, wheelchair, power wheelchair football, Down syndrome, a whole range of different disabilities, and a growing area, as we're all aware of through COVID, has been supporting mental health, and that's through children and adults. A big area is around creating opportunities to enable people to participate, and that could be through a range of sports, and including football, obviously. So people like sometimes wonder, well, you know, how do you actually fund as a charity? Charities have had to become very sustainable and generate income from many different sources, and we're no different to that. So we get our money from grants, fundraising. That could be some of our events like the Coastal Challenge that you as businesses may want to get involved in. We have contracts that we actually deliver, some in schools and other organisations that hire our services. And then another area is obviously sponsorship. And we've had some great supporters through the Nest and the charity that will perhaps, especially from the construction industry, that you'll be very familiar with. So how did this happen? So a long time ago, we've been realising that actually the growth of the charity was getting bigger. Some of the interest in what we do and how we can impact on the local community has grown, which enabled us to say, actually, if we had a better facilities, more facilities, we could help more people and enable them to progress, whether it's realising their potential, giving them opportunities through sport, progressions into education, employment, all those different things. But we really needed a home where we could grow all those services. So we decided to build the Nest, and we set about that challenge, and challenge it has been, and the team has been on this path with us for so long now. So and Mark will allude to where we perhaps started. So our first thing, like probably lots of different industries, is really about, we needed a site. We needed a site that was close. We needed it in the right place. So we worked with Chaplin and Farrant to try and identify suitable sites. We worked with the councils trying to find places. And then we had to do a lot of needs analysis about who needed the support where, to be able to download funding to be able to actually build what we wanted. So we eventually found here there were Anglia Windows, but at the time it was owned by the City Council, County Council, in a Broadland area, and leased to Anglia Windows. And that was quite a complicated task to actually buy this piece of land, because it had so many complicated parts in it. So that took 2 years, but the council quite rightly wanted to know that if we were having this site, what we were going to build, how we were going to benefit people, how it would be sustainable. So all of those things had to happen before we could even buy the site, which was, again, quite a difficult task, because there was lots of things. We didn't know if we could get planning permission. We didn't know how much the building was going to cost. There was a huge risk that if we bought this site, we might not be able to do what we want to do, and would be left with a site that really might be a drain on the charity. So it was a real difficult time of whether we did go and buy it. But so we set about then trying to decrease the risk to the charity. We started looking at the operational specification. What sort of building did we want? How would it bring in money? How would it make us enable lots of different people to use it? So our disability specification was very high. We wanted a light, airy, functional space that could be adaptable from one minute being a classroom to the next minute being a fitness studio. And we needed all these spaces to be really robust for the different groups that we were going to use. So that was difficulties. And then also we had our budget constraints. So with that cost uncertainty, we went to Richard Utting Associates and worked with the team there. We then had to work up a relationship with the airport, because we knew there would be huge constraints, and that could be our biggest risk to not being able to build the facilities. A lot of discussions with planners. And then we started obviously trying to look at, will anyone actually give us the money to build this? Because it's great having a vision, but a vision never comes off the ground if nobody else backs it. Our trustees backed us, and they found the 750,000 that we'd been putting away in a reserved pot for quite some time. But again, our challenges were who would put their money in first and trust us, who would believe in us that we could build it, and did the public really know who we were so that we could actually, they knew about our impact. So we went ahead and bought it. And as you can see from the site pictures there, it was in a pretty sorry state when we got it. So you'll see the knee-high, the pictures with me, myself and Tom Smith. He's a trustee as well as a director at the football club, and you can see the state that we inherited. However, phase one was managed, and Mark pops onto the next slide. This is what we actually managed to build. The grass pitches were complete. We did bunk boxes with overmill. They were brilliant. We had Omnis complete the work on the building. Unfortunately, that didn't go quite so well at the end, as perhaps lots of people will know, but it was a really amazing facility that we built. So then we moved on to phase two, which Mark will talk to. Our next step was, how do we get funding for this bigger part of the project? So we even started with an indoor option because we didn't think we were able to have floodlights, and Mark will allude to that later. However, we eventually overcame that challenge and we started our fundraising campaign. So what we thought we were going to build to start with didn't actually happen because we didn't get the levels of funding that we wanted. So I've had to apologize lots of times to the team because we had to change the goalpost. We had to move the goalpost from 1 minute we're building this to actually we haven't got the money, we're now going to have to build this. And we had to phase the project. So phase one was the clubhouse. The second phase was our hub and our IT suite, 3G pitch, changing rooms, cafe and car parking. That was 4.6 million. And we had to drop off this element, which was the gym and the sports hall, for a later date for our phase three. So there was a lot of things that we had to put in place to make sure that the building was able to transition into that phase three and we could still build it. But again, we always have that issue of we didn't have 4.6 million ready to go, and our fundraising target was quite a challenge for us to achieve. However, so we've worked with Chaplin Farrant on the design. They'll talk about that. We'll talk about the costs with Richard Uttings. We also had Football Foundation framework to encounter as well. So we had a separate pitch contractor, SIS, and then we obviously had Cox Edge as our main contractor. So it was working around all of those different elements to actually build the facilities. Internally, probably quite an interesting part from the client management side, that sat with myself. Normally my role was funding and getting groups involved. So it was a very different role to me. And the team were brilliant at educating me and helping me to make some of the decisions that we had to make along the way. But we had to then increase our fundraising team. We were then trying to run phase one whilst building phase two and getting it operationally ready. And we had to invest in and get more people involved in our fundraising board. And things were going all right. And then had a really busy site. Phase one was going brilliant. Construction's heading in the right direction. And as everybody knows, COVID, we then got relegated. And at that point, we still had £1 million to fundraise for. So our funding was tricky. So this is just so that you can understand, sometimes when you work perhaps as in construction with a charity, it will be really rewarding, but there'll be some challenges that they face that might be not as easy as maybe a school contract or a local authority, because they've got all their money lined up, ready to go. They know exactly what it is. As you can see from here, we had 6.2 million. We had 6 major funders, 30 trusts, 19 major donors, they're individuals. We had 44 corporate businesses and 359 general donations. And those all made up 28 fundraising events to enable us to get all of those large pots of money. We then threw in an extra bit, and we actually did our challenge woods with the county council and built 130,000. This facility has gone through the roof as well. We took 4,000 bookings in 2 weeks, and it's been a phenomenal addition to the site, which we delivered with Capco. Spillins came and sponsored it. So we've had a a really great response so far. From opening the doors, we saw 3,000 people in the first 2 weeks of different people coming to the site in Easter. And we know already that our footfall is far exceeding our expectations. So far the building, we're learning to live in it and work it. And it's been when people come in and see it, they are overwhelmed with what we've got. So you can see there the sort of site layout with the challenge woods, our old clubhouse and the hub. It brings such a unique experience for lots of different people, and it enables us to see so many different people. So I think that's next one from me, Mark. So just finally, just say thank you to the team for supporting, and all of our construction team, subcontractors that have done a great job in pulling this all together, because it has been quite a challenge from both sides to complete this with everything that's going on in the world. And just thank you to everybody who's played a part, helped sponsor it, donated, done their little bit. You know that you've played your part in making this a brilliant place.
Brilliant, thanks Jackie. Yes, so as Jackie said, we've been involved with them on other projects and looking at this. So a bit of background, we first started looking at sites with CSF back in May 2013, potentially options around Colney. That didn't work out, and then May 2014 we produced the first feasibility designs for this scheme up at the Angler Windows site. So like Jackie said, phase 1 was the grass pitches of the clubhouse, phase 2 being the nest and the 3G pitch, and starting what were the aspirations in terms of providing a full-size indoor 3G pitch, 4 to 5 court sports hall, and looking at, you know, what do we need to provide, how is that going to sit on the site, how the massing work, and what were the influences of the airport. You stand on the site and your first impressions are this is fantastic. It's a great big open space. There's plenty of room. There's lots of things to do, and lots of potential ways of doing it. And then you bring in the challenges, being the airport. Obviously challenges around highways and things like that as well. The NDR was coming online as we developed it, so the junction designs had to incorporate the changes to the NDR, the roundabouts, and how the access to and from the site was going to work around that. But without doubt, the airport presented the biggest challenge. Flight paths, height restrictions of structures, light levels we were allowed, spill limitations for lighting, potential crash takeoff abort zones for the airport, and then having to get all this signed off by the airport and the Civil Aviation Authority as well, or just added to the challenges. It's not every day you get the big Galaxy C10s coming in over, but when they do, and have potential to do it, you can see why we had the limitations on the heights on the site.
Mark, just before you go on, your camera's not on if you wanted to.
Is it? Right, okay.
Show your face, and I'll duck back out now.
So yeah, so you've got this great big clear open site, and then the airport came back and gave us this. So as you can see, the square box was on the plan, was the bit we were looking at. But obviously the restrictions, the takeoff in the pink, the blue, and how that affected it in terms of the heights. And the way it worked is effectively we're about 400 meters from the end of the runway, and those pink lines effectively form almost like a cheese wedge. So the solid blue lines are the takeoff and approach directly in, but then there's the ability for them to move either side of that, on either way in terms of the approach, but also if they aborted the landing or the takeoff for any reason. So that presented restrictions in terms of the heights of the building. So the first thing we really had to do was model how that works. You can see here we sort of modeled a cheese wedge, if you like, that we called it, for this approach and takeoff from the airport. And basically anything that was shaded gave us restrictions in terms of heights. So the further we came away from the site, the centre of the site, the more space we had. But obviously the site was long and thin, and the approach ran right down the middle of it, as you can see here. So They obviously 400 metres from the runway didn't give us a lot of scope to do too much. Floodlighting for sports facilities is normally between 13 and 15 metres high. And at the point of where we had the edge of the pitch, we had a restriction of about 9.6 metres. So not ideal for floodlighting and achieving what we needed to do in terms of the light levels, the glare levels from a football foundation and FIFA point of view, who were having to sign off the pitch. So again, that evolved in the design. The further we came away from that 9.6 metres, the higher we could come, which gave us the reason why the sports hall sat in the location it did, to be able to get the height we needed internally for that, for Sport England and people like that. And originally looking at the, as Jackie said, having the sports hall and the 3G pitch indoors, which wouldn't have been so much of a problem with the lighting, because we could spread it out across the ceiling, get the uniformity that we needed without having to worry about necessarily having the height. So when we first started, as Jackie said, we had a full-size indoor 3G as well as a sports hall. The design reflecting the aerofoil shape and the wing and acknowledging the airport, but more so being driven by the restrictions, dropping down on the left to get us to the 9.6 that we had, and then climbing as we came back into the site. Budget restraints meant that couldn't happen, and we had to rethink that and what we'd do. So that took us back to an external 3G pitch, and then it was how we were going to light it. The first people we spoke to were really struggling in terms of how we get the lighting to work and get the uniformity. We could get the light levels just about, but it was getting the uniformity and avoiding the dark spots by not having the height on the floodlights. So we explored options of suspending the floodlights across the pitch so that we could have them a lot lower all the way across, and then still have the ability to get the levels we needed. But then actually went back, spent quite a lot of time with some Tobal and people like that, developing the lighting and the scheme. And with the movement of LED lighting and things like that, we actually managed in the end to get a scheme to work with the different floodlights. So we've actually got higher floodlights on one side of the pitch to achieve what we needed. And that led us to the sort of final solution, which was the outdoor pitch with the floodlights. So how do we deliver it? We took a really early decision to use BIM for the scheme for various numbers of reasons. To start with, it gave us the ability to model it very easily, and from a client's point of view, obviously still looking for the funding and where that was coming from. The more visual that we could make the presentations, and the more information we could give to them to go away and talk to potential funders and donors and things like that, all helped. So by modelling it in Revit, we were able to provide walkthroughs, visuals, and things like that. And then moving into the actual scheme, it meant that we could use it for clash detection, making sure the steel work, the M&E and everything else came together. So it really made a big difference right the way through the project, and through to on site. So as we said, we worked the whole thing through in BIM, working with the pitch contractors as well in terms of how their work was going to integrate, how it was all going to come together. Because as Jackie said, we had the pitch contractors building the 3G pitch literally on the same fence line as we had the main contractor doing the build at the same time. So these were really what we produced moving forward in terms of going to site and how it was going to work. But we managed to, we had to obviously go to funders and do presentations, some of the fly-throughs we did, and also we did some various different panoramics that we managed to model from the system as well, which we could put on virtual headsets. So we did that at quite a few presentations, dealing in a headset, trying to understand how the pitch works and into the building was really good to see. So developing it through, as Jackie said, the whole thing was built around flexibility, and the design scaled down from phase one as we went through. So the sports hall, the gym that we had, all then moved from this phase into a potential future phase. So we always had to have at the back of our minds that hopefully some funding will come through and that might happen. So the whole scheme had to allow for this expansion to take place. The multi-use spaces that you see coming off reception, we're going to multi-use halls, can also be used for presentations, classrooms, things like that. So they became a lot more flexible in this scheme because we didn't have the luxury of having the separate spaces in that we did when we had the original bigger scheme. So everything really needed to be able to double up the dividable, movable acoustic partitions in the big multi-use space on the left. So it can be one big space linked in with reception. It can be a space on its own separate, divided down into individual smaller classrooms. And then obviously meeting the requirements of the foundation with regards to the changing facilities, the sizes of the actual changing rooms, and then how we could make the end of the building as flexible as we can to accommodate the external users. Because obviously there's going to be as many, or if not more, people using the external pitches than the 3G and potentially the internal spaces. So how could we provide for those people to use the building without disturbing everyone else and allow everything else to move forward as well? So the scheme, as it's delivered now, has the ability to have the sports hall effectively plugged in, some additional changing facilities put in there. The IT classroom that we've got now was originally in phase 2, so that's got the ability to move and relocate that current classroom back to an office space, and potentially put the gym back on the front as and when funding allows. So that was a real drive all the way through. So how did it start? How did it finish? Obviously, mentioned we produced all the visuals to help try and sell the scheme early on in terms of funding, and also with the planners and the airport, it proved really useful in that. So really, just it was interesting to get to the end, and Ian said when I was down there last week, what was really good is what we've got at the end actually looks like the photos. It didn't change. We managed with the whole team to deliver what everyone had been told they were going to get from day one, and what it would look like. And the visuals on the left, we were obviously really pleased that the visual on the left turned out as close to the actual photographs on the right as it did. So that we managed to deliver as a team on what we said we would, and what people were expecting to see when they were asked to put the money in was what they got delivered. Despite the challenges around the site constraints, the VE, and the funding, we managed to deliver what we said we would. So that was a really big bonus. And then for us, it's all about what it looks like. The 3G pitch is fantastic. You can see there that how the floodlights don't look as tall as you potentially expect them to be, but they deliver. It's a great facility. Norwich ladies play up there. And that's a real bonus to add to the grass pitches that we put in as part of the first phase. We wanted it to be a really welcoming space. It's about nurturing, and we wanted it to be a real focal as you came into the site. It's such a long approach as you come down into the site from the A140. It was very much about the building needed to make a statement, but also be very clear and give a really easy understanding of what was where, and to be fair to CSF, the signage that we worked in there with them, that they wanted to put on has really made a difference and really does stand out and really help you find your way around as well. I mentioned the classroom that became an IT suite. Again, great facility. The carpets and everything, a lot of what's on phase 2 links back to what we developed as part of phase 1 in terms of the branding, the colour schemes and things like that. So the whole site becomes a united facility right across across it. The multi-use space that we talked about, the acoustic partitions, the big TV wall at the end which came in, which obviously makes a massive impact on that end wall and really changes the ability to what you can use that space for. Can be divided out and work closely with the acousticians and the design to actually make sure that the space works for a whole variety, whether it be yoga, Zumba, conferences, teaching classes. and then the main reception. We wanted to really make it clear what the building was about and make it really easy to navigate your way through. As you come down the site, the two corridors that link off, providing the changing accommodation and the back house facilities, you can see right through the building. You can see from the car park right the way through into the 3G pitch, and we wanted the same in reception. We wanted to almost bring the outside in and get that interaction between people in the building and people outside the building. And so when you come into the space at the front, you can instantly see what's going out and what's going on at the back. You feel part of the space. You can interact with that space and view the pitches internally as well as externally. And the big double height space just create a real presence and a sense of arrival in there. Linked in with the reception and the cafe area, which creates a really good social, vibrant spaces. So it wasn't about having a reception and then you moved on to somewhere else. It was about having people integrated and socialising and mixing in this big reception space, and knowing what was going on with everybody else as well, and being able to see what was going on around the site. You could see in the cafe and see the pitch, or you can see what was going on in the multi-use. And that theme carries through to the next phase in terms of bringing in the gym and the sports hall and how they all link in as well. The change rooms, as you would expect, fairly standard run-of-the-mill, but again designed to accommodate the Football Foundation guidelines and the funding that's been put in. Very conscious of the safeguarding and the way we design the showers and the cubicles and everything. But some great spaces that the coaches can work in and develop from. And then, the big one for us, the stand and the covered seating area, the ability for the ladies to play there and have the seated spectators. The stand running down the side there makes a real impact on the side of the pitch and gives when you're on the pitch, it gives it a real sense of place and being actually a real venue and a stadium feel in there, which is what we all wanted to achieve. We're really pleased with how it developed and finished up, and we think we've got hopefully got a great building at the end of it. So that's everything from a design point of view that we looked at. So I'll let Gavin talk you through the rest of the bits.
Thanks, Mark. So Mark mentioned from his perspective all about what it looks like. From our perspective, really, it's all about what it costs. So going right back to what Jackie talked about in the early stages, our key objective during the feasibility stage is really to try and inform CSF the cost implications of all those options provided by Chaplin Farrant. So we worked with the design team collaboratively to dissect those options, distill them into one-page cost summaries, really, which could easily be reviewed by CSF at board level, ultimately, so they can understand the spend and what their fundraising commitments were. So during that process, we didn't really just consider building form, steel frame, etc. We also looked at the whole picture of incoming stats, how that would be affected by the different building forms, highways implication, which Mark mentioned, the cut and fill required on site to accommodate them. And really, whilst it does look very simple in nature, the civil engineering challenges imposed by the 3G pitch were quite considerable. The sheer area of it and the requirement to maintain level access, form retaining walls, etc., really helped inform some of those early cost studies. In producing this presentation, we went back through and we actually realized we produced around 12 fully costed different option studies of all the bits that Mark showed and presented. Once the client had made a decision on which option they want to proceed with, we worked with Chaplin Farrant to develop the design further and produce a fully detailed elemental cost plan. And this was really to validate what we did earlier in terms of the cost studies, but it also raised some other cost challenges, particularly on incoming stats and how we developed the energy strategy of the project. The result of that elemental cost plan was that we established the cost limit, but we also needed to show how we could move our way back to that if required. So we spent some considerable time looking at value engineering options, some of which we chose to take forward at that stage, some which we chose to hold in reserve. Once Jackie had set her funding limit, we then worked through what we need to do to achieve that, and that was ultimately the phase scheme. So from our perspective, that was all about understanding what the cost implications were from separating the sports hall for a later date. So what we did as part of that process is we no longer required Sports England funding because the sports all dropped away. So we isolated what we could do elsewhere within the scheme, and that's for the savings that would be available. And then we also looked at how we could minimise that phase one spend whilst maintaining the ability to expand and extend the facility at a later date. So we were quite careful about what plant we included, what future provisions we included, but ultimately what we didn't include to make sure the phase one spend was minimised. Next slide, please, Mark. So in terms of delivering works, the challenge is really about accommodating CSF's operations on site. As Jackie mentioned, the existing pitches, the clubhouse remained fully operational. And this, when I say operational, I mean fully operational. We had weekends where there was hundreds of people on site, children using the football pitches, and the main contractor really had to work around those. So in pre-contract stage, we spent a lot of time tailing our employers' requirements, working with CSF to ensure that the site would be managed effectively. We'd achieve full separation between the construction procedures and the operations on site. We also made sure those employers' requirements accommodated events, fundraising events that were needed, people walking around the site, Jackie trying to make sure those donations kept coming, and that it was then be fully secured for weekend working for bank holidays. Once those ERs were complete and we developed the design through, we used a single stage tender process through design and build. And we also lent on the most competitive tenders to provide further value engineering options to make sure we were achieving exactly what we needed to for the limited funding that was available. And I think one of the reflections of how robust that design was and the tender process and the employer's requirements was that in fact we had very minimal provisional sums, really only to do with a couple of client items that we can make a decision on later on. We ended up with quite a robust, effective all-round contract being delivered and agreed to. As mentioned earlier, we spent a lot of time considering how we should approach the 3G pitch delivery. Ultimately, the decision was made to tender those works by the Football Foundation through their specialist framework. So our challenge as employer's agent was really to ensure that the contract, in the first instance, delineated those works and the site set up. So we made sure that drawings were marked up to show that the main contractor was responsible for the reduced level dig for the 3G pitch and some of the paving adjacent to it. But we went into quite a lot of detail in terms of a real tick list of you're doing this, you're doing that, all the way down to who's installing floodlight bases, etc., to make sure it was as unambiguous as possible. The pitch contractor was ultimately responsible for taking that reduced level dig and installing the specialist 3G pitch and all the drainage associated with those works. What happened on site was the contractors were a lot more pragmatic than we perhaps were in the employer's requirements. So they reallocated areas of paving. We agreed the cost change between those, and they set up proactive, dynamic ways of working so they weren't interfering with each other. Overall, the joint delivery of that pitch worked really well, and I think validated the decision to split the works into separate contracts. That's probably it from a cost perspective, and I think on completion of the work, CSF have a facility which we're all proud of as a project team. It's well built, meets their requirements and provides the ability to expand into the future whilst being within their cost limit. So back to you, John.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. That was a very insightful and honest presentation that we received there. The video is most helpful. I'm not sure where the sound disappeared to at the end, but I think our attendees would have got the gist of what we're trying to display there in real time. Let's have a look, see if we've got any questions coming through. Not at the moment, but one for me, maybe Mark. You mentioned about the airport restrictions and the flight path. I mean, how did you find the interaction with the marketplace around trying to solve that challenge? Was it one that sat firmly with you and your design colleagues, or did you find that the supply chain was happy to engage around finding a solution to the lighting strategy in terms of its overall outcome in the end?
It was interesting right the way through. Obviously, at the start, we had to involve the airport and understand their restrictions in terms of how that was going to work. There was the lighting was a prime example. We spoke to various different contractors and manufacturers about how this could work, and looked at all sorts of options. And when we didn't go down the route of the indoor pitch, that challenge really came to the forefront. But having gone through 2 or 3 that couldn't do it, when we actually sat down and went through it in a lot more detail, and really sort of challenged Thorn and Zumtobel to come up with something. It took a while to get there. Like I say, it wasn't necessarily the levels, it was a uniformity of things that we needed to achieve. But once we did that, yeah, they were on board and I think relished the challenge to do it. They hadn't done it before. The initial thought was it can't be done, but we have. And then going forward, I mean, there's obviously challenges around the construction. How did we actually put the building up, steel frame, and things like that when you can't put cranes up because you've got holiday charter flights and Galaxy C10s coming in. And to be fair, Cox Edge managed that really well. How they're going to address that and actually sort of reevaluate the whole way of doing it to be able to make sure that they still delivered it and got the frame up without increasing the procurement time and the time on site. So it was a real effort right the way through by everybody to be able to achieve it and deliver it.
Great, and it's great to see that from our perspective as a professional team that we managed to solve a problem or a challenge that the Football Foundation hadn't actually come across themselves in their 3G pitch installations that they're doing up and down the country. So I think that's a credit. Okay, one more question for me. We've not got any that I've kind of shared from the floor unless they come in quickly. Jackie, other than a breather, with such a hugely diverse offer now that CSF has, both at the Nest, down by the football club and your other facilities, and I guess being the admiration of your peers in this field, what is next for CSF? What is the next challenge? Where do you go from here?
I think breathe is a good thing, Chant, thank you. Yeah, it's been difficult. I mean, I come from a funding background and that's my role. So moving into construction and not understanding most of the things that everybody's talking about is really quite tricky. So having a site manager and a team around you who can really talk about the detail of that is brilliant. But for the moment, people always go, oh, this looks amazing. You can go on holiday and have a rest now. And actually, this is where also the real hard work starts, because now you have to fill it with all the people that you said were going to use it and have the impact on the people that you said you were going to help. So staffing it, suddenly we're running around like headless chickens with hardly any staff trying to man the building. So when we built the Challenge Woods, we didn't expect it to be so successful. We've got 84,000 views off of one post on Facebook. It went crazy. And now we have 200 between 9 and 4. We have toddlers and mums utilising the space. So we're really pleased that we put a changing places in. We're pleased that we put lots of baby changing in. Those were things that we didn't perhaps anticipate the facility being used for. So what our job now is to service the group of people that we want to come. Coming out of COVID is actually some ways helped at times because we've managed to not open the cafe straight away, and we've managed to do a little takeaway and then move into actually sit down and all of those things. So at the moment, it's just utilising the spaces properly, learning how boilers work and different things like that will continue. But yeah, I think the facility we're really proud of, and now we're about showing it to as many people. And we've got charities, businesses wanting to hire it for conferencing. So servicing everyone needs is the main thing. Then I say after a little while, if things change with funding, Gavin will say what potentially it might cost, but at least £4 or £5 million for the next phase. So we've got a lot of fundraising to do if we were going to do that. It would probably have to link in with SIL funding, housing development, all of those things to justify that money coming and the additional facilities. So we could be a little while until we move on to phase 3, but you never know what happens in construction and funding and everything else going on in the world today. So.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Jackie. I mean, a question from the floor, someone you'll be familiar with, Jeremy McNulty. Jeremy's asked, have we had much interest received from your peer organisations or other football clubs in what you've now delivered here and what you've achieved and how you might have done it?
Yeah, I did actually. I've had quite a number of calls. One of them was Newcastle Foundation. They're building an £8.2 million facility on a number of floors. And from an operational perspective, they loved our design. They're basic, but I think they will get very much of a white box with no design specific. You know, some of the things that we put in with Mark was the colour and the scheme and all of those things that's brought the place to life. So they don't know about their furniture. They've been talking to them about furniture. We're trying to talk to them about their AV and TVs and everything else. So we've had a number of different people who've come to us, said, well, how did you do that? What did you do? And hopefully some problems that we've had, we can share with them, or challenges that we've overcome to help them achieve their facilities. And also some of our partners that we're working with, whether Blue Space are doing our furniture, I can help them by advising them to perhaps use some of these people that we've used, have really helped us. So yeah, quite a number of them. Football Foundation are very proud of what we've done. Hopefully some of our major funders, whether it's football club, county council, all of those different people that have played their part, hopefully will be very proud of what we've achieved.
Fantastic. Another question for you, Jackie. It's from Lewis Beals. What lessons have you learnt in terms of securing funds for the scheme of this nature and you would consider for other charitable organisations? I guess, what pitfalls have you found, what opportunities you found, and how do you find your way through the system, really?
The biggest thing is probably relationship building and getting people's trust in you as an organisation. Probably the hardest bit is getting the first bit of money, because a flat bit of paper that says you've got no pounds in there at all is really hard for someone to believe that it'll actually ever happen. So no one puts their money in. They all want to be the last funder. No one wants to be the first funder. So our SIL money of about £1 million to start with was brilliant. Relationship with the council, essential, because you need that support, the LEP, Growth Board, all of those big partners. And then obviously what we achieved, £2 million from the Football Foundation, was essential. It's getting your big chunks first, and most capital projects are the same. You just got to go for your big money first and then work your way down to then doing your public campaign, releasing that out to see who else will support it. And then the last bit is probably the hardest. You're getting round to your last £1 million. The football club came in and said, look, we'll find £500,000 and we'll match that with every, the £500,000 you've got to raise. So every pound you raise, we'll put £1 in. And that really helped push the money on again. But it is, every day is a worry, because you've told everyone that you're going to build this amazing facility, and then you've got to deliver it from a financial perspective. And that's scary every day, because you just think, what if I don't do this? I've spent so much money on architect fees and all the planning and all the stuff, and you've told all these people and got them so excited and hopeful that this facility is going to happen. So it does, it's become it's a stressful part. Make sure that you're not trying to do 6 other jobs at the same time, so you can dedicate a bit of time to doing it and get a good team around you. You just have to go and tell as many people about it. I must have bored every friend I've ever had about this project, because they've heard it that many times, but you do have to live it to make it happen. If not, you can't go in it half-hearted, because you'll never achieve it.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Okay, I think that probably wraps up the Q&A piece. From a forum piece of events that are coming up, so you can all get them in your diaries. Next Thursday is our AGM on the 20th, and you will see the invite go out from Jan for that one, so feel free to pop along and engage with us at that session. The 24th of June, we're going to have a talk on the Norwich Distributor Road, where it is now, lessons learned, and where it might go in the future. There'll be an invite for that. We're hoping, as we enter more into life as normal, that might be an in-person presentation, but we'll see. If not, we'll be back to this forum, but hopefully we can get a few of us in a room. On the 8th of July, we have Andrew Savage giving us a talk about all things Broadland Housing Association, where they are, where they see themselves going, what they've learned over the last 12 months, what are their challenges, how they're seeing the market. And Andrew will be no doubt insightful into the way that they're finding the residential market. On the 15th of July, we're planning a walking quiz of Norwich. So we are going to get out there. We are going to try and regroup. We are going to have some social interaction that I know most of us have been crying out for well over a year now. And it'll be great to get some part of normality. So watch this space. That's happening. The committee on the case. Over August or September, we're probably going to have a custom build home site visit. More to follow on that. But it's a very bespoke home, and we're going to have a walk through some of that, the lessons learned, the challenges of building your own bespoke property. On 16th of September, we are planning our summer drinks reception, almost autumn drinks reception. You're the first to hear it here first. So get that date in your diary. It will be a ticketed event. We're expecting demand to be high. It will be held near the cathedral. The flyer is about to land imminently. But again, hopefully it's an opportunity to return to some normality, get us all back together, get us all interacting with each other and catching up with our colleagues and fellow professionals in a larger forum than we've been able to do so for the last 12 months. And lastly, the date that I know you all want, which is the Norfolk property dinner. So subject to Boris and everything else that it might chuck out over the next six months, the 10th of February is the date for your diary for the Norfolk property dinner. It will be subject to membership. It will be subject to table allocations. It will be subject to attendees, but that's the date to put in your diary. And we're certainly aiming for it and hopefully going to achieve it. So thanks to my panelists. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. I appreciate you all got busy day jobs, and to come and talk to me and our group is certainly, I'm pleased and very thankful of that. And thank you to our audience for attending today. And I hope you enjoyed today's talk. And thanks to Jan for pulling together the logistics, because to be honest, I wouldn't know where to start with a webinar. Should any of your colleagues have missed today's talk or would like to watch it again, we will be posting it on our NFCI YouTube channel. We've gone all high tech in the pandemic, so look out for our talk on there. There are a couple of others that have been uploaded from previous events, and we'll upload as many as we are able to, and our panelists are happy for us to do. So on that note, draw to a conclusion. Have a great day. Thank you and goodbye.